Wow, ladies and gents, that was quite something. Amber Turd on the stand. That was quite something. Now, this is quite a long highlight reel, and let me just sort of discuss it first before I show you all the clips. What I've done here is highlight very specific things. I make no qualms about it. I'm always upfront and honest about what I'm doing here. And this is all pertaining to these incredibly awful events that have transpired in her life with Johnny Depp. And I've highlighted them, and there's some others in there just for context as well, but I've highlighted them for a reason, because it looks like she's trying really hard to cry. There's no flushing of the face, there's no redness, there's no tears. She's making all the right sounds, but there's nothing's coming out. And she flips, like a click of a finger, from one emotion to another. Look, it's very inauthentic. It looks like a performance. I'm not going to lie. It just looks like a performance. It's very unconvincing, very inauthentic. And it looks like she's trying her hardest to cry. Yeah. And then there's some things in there. She's like, oh, I don't do cocaine. Well, you admit to your nurse he did. This is just, it's just ridiculous. I'm just going to leave it. I've been watching this for a few hours now. I'm just going to leave it to you guys. You drop your thoughts down below. But we've seen her smiling throughout this trial. And now she's on the stand trying to cry. It's a performance. It's a performance. And I think it's really important to note as well, ladies and gents, this is the first woman in Johnny Depp's entire life that has ever accused him of anything. It just doesn't stand up. Doesn't hold up.
All right, your next witness.
Your Honor, we'd like to call Laura Amber Heard to the stand.
All right.
Amber Laura.
I do. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Your Honor. Will you please state your name?
Yes, it's Amber Laura Heard.
Why are you here?
I am here because my ex-husband is suing me for an op-ed I wrote.
And how do you feel about that?
I struggle to have the words. I struggle to find the words to describe how painful this is. This is horrible for me to sit here for weeks and relive everything. Hear people that I knew, some well, some not. My ex-husband, with whom I shared a life, speak about our lives in the way that they have. This is the most painful and difficult thing I've ever gone through, for sure. I felt like this man knew me and saw me in a way that no one else had. I felt he understood me. I felt he understood where I came from. I felt that, like, when I was around Johnny, I felt like the most beautiful person in the whole world. It made me feel seen, made me feel like $1 million. And that kind of feeling where, he's just lavish gifts and lavish expressions of love, and how he had never met a woman like me. I mean, I remember he took the foil off of this bottle and put it on my ring finger, and I had only been with him like days, or maybe it was weeks at the time. Yeah, it was probably about a few weeks, but it just felt very intense. But we weren't doing normal life stuff. We weren't like stuck in traffic with each other. We weren't going to the grocery store and doing life. We were like hiding in these places around the world. He has so many homes. And so we'd be in one of those homes, or my home at the time, and it would be like a bubble, like we were in this little bubble of secrecy, and it felt like a warm glow, as we would say. Just music and the kind of books that we both loved and poetry that we both knew by heart, and it felt like a dream. It felt like absolute magic.
We've heard a little testimony about boots. What, if anything, did you do to help Johnny with his boots?
Well, I mean, I suppose that I took off his boots, and it made an impression on him, and I was happy to, anything I can do to show love. Certainly how I felt about him. But if he wanted to take off his own boots, he certainly could. It was every time I was walking out of the house, he would ask me, "That's really what you're wearing, kid? Oh, I see. I wore a dress to an event once, and I felt beautiful in it." Like, stupid as that sounds, I felt pretty in this dress I picked out, and I showed it him because it's a carpet, it's red carpet, so it's like, publicized, and I kind of thought it was weird. He wasn't saying anything about it. I left him to go do this red carpet, and I was like, "Did you see the event I went to?" Basically, I felt pretty, and I thought, like, "Did you see that?" I wanted him to say something about that, I guess. And he said, well, this is after he stopped talking to me for some time, didn't tell me why. When he came back in my life, he wouldn't explain why he was acting different. He just kind of acted mad at me and didn't know what I had done wrong. And when I brought up the dress and the event, because it was an event to support a charity I was really involved with at the time, and I said, "Did you see that thing?" And he said, yeah, I think the whole world saw that, kid. That's how they'll remember you. That's how the world will remember you. And I was like, oh, come on. I mean, it's like, but I felt good in it. I felt good. And he said, "Yeah, kid, that's what you're putting out there in the world. No one will ever forget that. And that's all they'll see you as. That's what you wanted. That's what you were going for. My dress was low cut. I get it. It's low cut. But I felt, I felt really embarrassed and horrible that I wore that. I felt like, how could I have made that choice? Of course, he's right. You start to believe it. I started to believe that made a lot of sense, of course. But it didn't stop with that. It was clothing in general. And when I walked out of the house, it wasn't just like, "Hey, you're not allowed to wear that." It was like, "Oh, really? That's what you're wearing. No wonder you get cast in those roles. No wonder you that's what you are. That's what you're making it." And it continued. And then there would be a blow up. And at first it was just to throw something, smash some things. It loves to smash up a place, an apartment, furniture. That's what it started with. Glass. Threw glass at me, and I remember it was summer. And he just threw this glass across the kitchen, and it didn't hit me, but it shattered behind me, and I remember thinking that it very easily could have hit me. And that, calling me a whore, it didn't start with using the whore word, it was just comments, until it would escalate. And then I started to notice the pattern of escalation where he'd throw glass or turn over a table. Then he would hit the wall, and then he'd hit the wall really close to my head. Like when I'm standing there, just hit the wall, screaming at me. But then he would disappear and get clean and sober, and he'd come back and tell me that he was done drinking, he was over it. It's done, cleaned himself up. He had done it before, and he'd do it again. And then he would go back to this wonderful, almost just unreal, but real, but unbelievably nice, sensitive, kind, warm, generous, interesting, funny man that I loved. And he would make me feel so loved. Like I would feel so distant from that thing that was so scary that I would not even recognize it too. And that was how, our relationship kind of started to develop in that first year.
Do you remember the first time that he physically hit you?
Yes.
Please tell the jury about it.
It was it's seemingly so stupid, so insignificant. I will never forget it. It changed my life. I was sitting on the couch, and we were talking. We were having a normal conversation, just there was no fighting, no argument, nothing. And he was drinking, and I didn't realize at the time, but I think he was using cocaine because it was like there was a jar of cocaine out on the table. I realize that sounds weird, but it was like an actual vintage jar of it. But I didn't see him use it at the time, so I didn't really factor that in. I just, he's drinking and we're talking, and there's music playing, and he's smoking cigarettes, and we're sitting next to each other on the couch. And I asked him about the tattoo he has on his arm. And to me, it just looked like black marks. I didn't know what it said. It just looked like muddled, faded tattoo that was hard to read. And I said, what does it say? And he said it says wino. It says wino. And I didn't see that. I thought he was joking because it didn't look like it said that at all. And I laughed. It was that simple. I just laughed because I thought he was joking. And slapped me across the face. And I laughed. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. I thought, this must be a joke. This must be a joke. Because I didn't know what was going on. I just stared at him, kind of laughing still, thinking that he was going to start laughing too to tell me it was a joke. But he didn't. He said, "You think it's so funny? You think it's funny, bitch. You think you're a funny bitch." And he slapped me again. Like, it was clear it wasn't a joke anymore. And I stopped laughing, but I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what to do. You would think you would have a response, but I, as a woman, had never been hit like that. I'm an adult, and I'm sitting next to the man I love, and he slapped me for no reason, it seemed like, and I missed the point. It was that stupid. Second slap, I know he's not kidding, but I don't know what else to say or do, so I just stared at him. I didn't say anything. I didn't react. I didn't move or freak out or defend myself or say, "What are you doing? You're crazy." I just stared at him because I didn't know what else to do. And he slaps me one more time. Hard. I lose my balance. At this point, we're sitting next to each other on the edge of the couch, or I was on the edge of the couch. And I'm all of a sudden realizing that the worst thing has just happened to me that could possibly happen to you. I realized that I wish so much he had said he was joking. Because it didn't hurt. It didn't physically hurt me. I was just sitting there on this carpet, looking at the dirty carpet, wondering how I wound up on this carpet and why I never noticed that the carpet was so filthy before, and I just didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to react. I just sat there thinking, how much time do I have till I figure out what I need to do? Because, God, did he just hit me? No, I didn't want to leave him. I didn't want this to be the reality. I didn't want to have the man I was in love with. I know you don't come back from that. I'm not dumb. I know you can't hit a woman. You can't hit a man. You can't hit anyone. You can't just hit somebody because I knew it was wrong, and I knew that I had to leave him. And that's what broke my heart, because I didn't want to leave him. I thought if I got up out of that room, I'd leave the best thing that ever happened to me. And I wish I could sit here and say I stood up and I walked out of that house and I drew a line and I stood up for myself. But I was just looking at the dirty carpet, trying to will myself to get up, to walk out of the door, because I knew I needed to. And I really slowly, I stood up, and I remember looking at him in the eye and just looking at him, frankly, because I didn't know what else to do. And before I know it, he starts crying. And, you know, like, I had never seen an adult man cry. I didn't even really see my dad cry at my grandma's funeral. You know, it's weird. And he's crying. Tears, just falling out of his eyes. He gets down on his knees and he grabs my hands and he's touching my hands and he's saying to me, I will never do that again. I'm so sorry, baby. I put the fucker away. I thought I killed it and it's done. I thought I put the monster away and I've done it before. It's done. But on his knees. And I didn't have words. I didn't know what to say. I just remember thinking that it was just, he was crying. He seemed so sorry, but I knew I couldn't just forgive him because right? That means it will happen again, no? You know, like I've seen the health class videos, like everyone else. And I got up in my car. I walked to the car. I didn't say anything. I made a point to not say, oh, it's okay, or anything like that. I just didn't say anything. I got up, I went to the car, I sat in my car, and I felt like I sat there forever. I didn't want to turn the key. I just leaned my head up against the window, and I remember just seeing my breath on the windshield, you know, on the glass of the window of the door, just seeing my breath and trying to will myself to have the strength to know what I should do in this moment, because I was heartbroken. And I sat there for a long time, and I eventually turned the key and drove home.
The evolution of your relationship after that time with Johnny.
I don't know how long it was until things got bad again. He did start drinking again. I remember it was almost, you know, he'd start drinking again, the disappearing thing, the coming back. He'd come back like in the middle of the night to my house. And it would be unclear to me, you know, drunk, often really drunk, and kind of accusing me, but not directly. Nothing was very direct. It was a lot of accusations, but they were veiled. You know, what I was wearing, who I was with, why didn't I text him back? I didn't text him back right away. This is when I was at my place in Orange. Sometimes he would show up to catch me. Like that was a pretext for coming over. And by the time we were done talking, I would have thought I had convinced him that I loved him, that I only loved him, there was no one else, and then that we were back in an upswing and would go back to good, loving, like sick, romantic love, like kind, sweet, velvety love. And then it would be something I said, why did you say it that way? You know, if I had to leave for an audition, I could guarantee that couldn't guarantee, but 2 of those in a row, and when I came back, he was angry at me. and I wouldn't necessarily know why. And then he started accusing me of things, probably like at first it was indirect and then it became really direct. Then the punching of the walls next to my head, which is a constant at that time in 2012 when he was drinking. Eventually that became, him accusing me of cheating. I'd defend myself. I'd say, that's crazy. You're wrong. I would never, the normal things. And it would escalate to the point where he would push me or shove me down, and then I'd get back up. And this happened several times. That's why it's not more specific, I suppose. When I'd get back up, I'd look him in the eye. I made a point of getting up and looking him in the eye. It's my way of defending myself at that time. And I'd look at him, and he'd ask me if I wanted to go again, and shove me back down. Eventually, he just hit me. Remember, he hit me in the face when I denied having an affair with my ex-wife, my ex-partner at the time. And he said he had proof. I denied it. And I was walking out of the bedroom, slapped me across the face. I turned to look at him. And I said, Johnny, you hit me. You just hit me.
I'm going to ask you, Michelle, can you bring up 1783, please?
What number again, please?
I'm sorry.
What number?
Defendants 1783.
1783. Thank you.
Do you recognize this picture?
Yes, I do.
And could you tell us what it is?
It's a picture of my face with a note that Johnny left for me by the coffee. Typically is where we'd leave notes like that.
And does this accurately depict the scene portrayed?
It was one of those scenes. As embarrassing as it sounds now, I don't know which scene this came from. There was a lot. It escalated quickly, fast, and it became.
Amber, let me ask it a different way.
Thank you.
Is this a picture of you? Is it an accurate picture of you?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to move the admission of 1783.
Your Honor, we have an objection. May we approach?
Sure.
Will you please describe for the jury some of the cycles you had with Mr. Depp through 2012?
So in 2012, the violence was pretty, relative to what it became, pretty, slapping, backhanding. Well, it went from this eggshell kind of, you're walking on eggshells, nothing you're doing is kind of right, but you don't know what you're doing wrong. And then I was doing something wrong clearly, but it was unclear within the scope of an argument what I was defending myself against. So it would shift from a rumor he had heard that I was with a friend, or I had been photographed standing too close to a male person. That was a person I had had something with, and I was lying to him about, and it would be it would be eggshells, accusations, and then he would explode. It started with throwing things, destroying the property, and screaming at me. I remember the screaming at me was the worst because I kind of always felt like I had done, I had to defend myself. I had to tell him so he didn't think these things were true. And sometimes, he would shift accusations while I'm trying to dispel one accusation. He'd start another one, and nothing I could do to calm him down. It seemed like I'd walk away, and that would make it worse. I remember in my apartment in Orange, he would grab me by the hair, or he'd grab me by the arm, pull me into him, scream at me that way. He'd smash things around me, then he would smash things very close to me, and then he would just hit me. And it started with slapping, and it got to be like repetitive slaps where he'd hold me in a position and slap me multiple times in a row. Then it would be, eventually I later would either push him off of me, or I'd try to hit his hands away from me. I tried to, not in 2012 so much. At that time, I was mostly, my defense was, I'd go some other place. Like, I don't know how to describe that. I'd focus on something else. I'd stand up, look at him, try to stand up to him that way. Later, I adopted other kind of strategies to deal with it. But at the time, in 2012, he'd have this blowout, and then he would leave, disappear, and I'd be committed to not talking to him. I'm done with this relationship. I can't take it anymore. I said that so many times. And then he'd come back, clean and sober, telling me either he had a chip. He didn't have any chips, but he would say, I've gone to meetings. I have a sober companion now. I'm doing this program. I'm reading this. I'm doing this. And he was done with drugs and alcohol for good this time. And he'd come back in my life, and with the combination of him being sober and having gone through this horrible thing where I felt like my heart ripped out of my chest, like a relationship ending is hard, I think, for anyone, but ending under that circumstance is really painful. And so when he'd come back, it would almost feel like a solution to that, and it would feel great, and we would be good again, and he'd be extra nice and extra apologetic and extra loving, and then we'd be back in the good bubble, the warm glow. And eventually I'd get bored, and then I'd see him drinking again. When I started to get upset, noticing the pattern of the violence going with the drinking and drugs, then he started sneaking it. So it became less clear, and I'd have to look for clues as to what he was on. So I just knew how to react, Johnny on speed is very different from Johnny on opiates. Johnny on opiates very different from Adderall and cocaine Johnny, which is very different from Quaaludes Johnny. But I had to get good at paying attention to the different versions of him. 2012, I was in the beginning stages of this, just learning these patterns. I was just learning that drinking kind of correlated with the violence.
And did you confide in anyone about these issues you were having? I think she can
Objection,
say
hearsay.
I think she can say if she told anybody.
As long as she doesn't say what she said.
Right,
Go ahead.
right.
All right.
So did you tell anyone?
Yes, I did.
Who did you tell?
I told my therapist. I eventually told my mom.
And let's go ahead and take a look at Defendant's Exhibit 150. 150.
Your Honor, I'm going to object on hearsay.
You want to approach?
Yeah.
Did you decide to confide in your mother about the issues you were having with Mr. Depp?
I think I I felt safe talking to my mom because I knew that she understood these dynamics and she wouldn't judge me for staying with him, for loving him, even though this was happening and was happening to me. I knew she would understand.
And when approximately did you start confiding in your mom about your issues with Mr. Depp and the physical abuse?
Objection, hearsay, compound.
I sustain as a compound.
When did you start confiding in your mother about the abuse you were suffering at the hands of Mr. Depp?
I was confiding in her from the very beginning about the abuse, the psychological abuse, the kind of control, the disappearing, the not knowing where he was, then he'd come back and sometimes in the middle of the night, the constant accusations, like that sort of thing I talked to her about probably from the very beginning. The fact that I was secret, I had to hide. I couldn't tell any of my friends that I was with him for a long time because he told me everyone would blame me for the split with him and his partner, so I had to kind of sneak around and kind of get brought to his house, typically in a secretive way, and then he'd come to mine in a secretive way, and it was just all very, so very isolating. And I confided with her at the very beginning on that sort of thing, and then later opened up to her about some of the violence. I did it gently. First I just wanted to have someone to talk to about how scary it was. The rage and the uncontrolled violence, the rage that this man had, and why it was pointed at me.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay. May we approach, please?
Okay. I remember he was accusing me again of sleeping with this artist, this musician who I'd never slept with. I was denying it. I barely knew the person. And then he was accusing me of sleeping with my friend in Spain. And I remember nothing I could do. He called this person on the phone and screamed at him. He didn't speak English, so he was really confused as to what he was being yelled at by Johnny. But I remember those were the accusations. That was the fight. But it was one to the next accusation. And I remember I was kind of doing that juggling act. I was in one of these fights, I believe it's this one, in his downtown ECB, we call it, loft. And we're in the kitchen living room area, and he backhands me. And, it was, he wears a lot of rings. I remember kind of just feeling like my lip went into my teeth. And it got a little blood on the wall. Just that simple, a little bit of blood on the wall. As hard as it is to explain this, I was so caught up in the relationship and also very occupied in defending what I only could assume he believed, these accusations, that, I didn't internalize, I didn't make that big of a deal of it. I kind of pride myself on being tough, and, I don't make a big deal out of, smaller injuries. And I know that sounds horrible and hard maybe to understand, but my best way to cope with it is I kind of, minimize it, make sure no one, make sure he knows that I'm tough and can't knock me down, and I make a joke of it, clearly. Make light.
I'm going to, Michelle, if you can take this one down and bring up 170A. Did there come a time in March, Amber, where you sent a picture to your mom?
Yes, this is sometime in March 2013. I sent it to her because I'd been texting about some of the craziness, and
Objection, hearsay.
I'll sustain as to what she may have texted. All right, next question.
Without saying what you said in the text, explain why you were sending it to your mom.
I was reaching out. I was very lonely in what I was living in, and I wanted help. I wanted advice, help. I just wanted to talk to somebody and figure out how I could make this stop.
And is this a picture that you took of yourself in March of 2013?
I did.
Your Honor, I'm going to move the admission of Defendant's Exhibit 170A.
Any objection?
No objection, Your
All
Honor.
right, 170A in evidence. You can publish the picture.
Thank you, Your Honor. And how did you sustain that bruise, Amber?
I had thrown Johnny slapped me. I walked away from him, and that made it worse. We got into like a shouting match. And he kind of did this thing with his body where I could tell he was going to hit me again. I picked up I remember it kind of like a little pot, not a pot, but like a vase. And I remember I got away from him enough as he reels back. I threw it in his direction and actually managed to get away before he got me. He grabbed me by the arm, and he kind of just held me on the floor, screaming at me. I don't know how many times he hit me in the face, but I remember being on the floor of my apartment, and I remember thinking, how could this happen to me again?
Can you bring up 170?
I was wondering how somebody who didn't do cocaine and was against it, that was in and of itself causing problems in our relationship. How could I hide? Why would I hide his drugs from, like he was insinuating that I was doing it or something? It made no sense. And he was telling me we're gonna conduct a cavity search, shall we? Like, just shoved his fingers inside me. And I just stood there staring at the stupid light. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there. While he did that, he twisted his fingers around. I didn't say, like, stop or anything. Because when it was good, it was so good. You've never felt love like that. At least that's how it felt. So much. I felt like he recognized me and I recognized him, and there was just something there that was the love of my life. And he was. He was, but he was also this other thing. he was also this other thing. And that other thing was awful, awful thing that would come out and take over, and it was, you couldn't see the Johnny I loved underneath it. It was this other thing. And no one told him, no one was honest with him, no one, he'd pass out in his own vomit, he'd lose control of his body, he'd lose control, and everyone would clean up after him. I cleaned up after him.